Thank you very much for everybody coming today. Hopefully you can hear us okay. Just another round of applause, please, for Tom for coming today.
Thank you.
So the way that the event is going to work, there's going to be a short kind of fireside style chat. Tom will kind of talk about his life, his experience within the culinary industry, and then I'll follow to questions afterwards. And at the end, if you'd like to ask anything, feel free to. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So over to you. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, lovely to be here, and it's always a pleasure to, I guess, yes, talk about my short life, I would say, yet. Although I've crammed in quite a lot. So listen, I'll sort of talk about how I got into cooking. I mean, I would say it's fairly interesting, for sure. So I am a twin. I have a twin brother, identical. And we are actually both chefs. But it started probably from the age of about 5 years old. I lived in Norfolk, which is obviously the county next to Suffolk. And my mother was an exceptionally great cook, home cook. But she also loved to grow vegetables. And we had a big garden. And all I remember at a very early age was her always being in the garden, growing and digging. And I was quite inquisitive about what was going on there. And fascination of food really started from there. So at the age of probably 4 or 5, she took me and my brother into the garden, introducing us to where and how vegetables grew. We got to learn about the seasons, when things were growing, spring, summer, autumn, winter. And that sort of fascination grew into us eventually having our own part of the vegetable plot, where we would take it over and grow our own vegetables, which for us as little boys was quite exciting. And then my father, he had his own wine business, and so he imported and exported wine to other parts of the world from France, and then he also had a wine shop in Norwich. And in the sort of earlier years, so sort of, I guess, around 8, 9, on various business trips that he went to France, we would go with him as a family, and we were often dragged around vineyards. We would go to sort of lunches with some of his clients. So we got to actually eat, quite fancy food at an early age. And by the time, we were sort of 7, 8, our mother then sort of started to see that we had an interest in what she was doing and asking her various questions about how things grew. And then, we then obviously started to work with her in the kitchen. And this was anything from, just simply preparing the vegetables or baking a cake. And, I had lots of really, beautiful memories of being with her in the kitchen, making a lot of mess with me and my brother. Making cakes and pastries and just generally, a nice Sunday roast and things like that. And it was on a skiing trip, actually, that we were coming back as a family. And my father had booked into this hotel, and we were staying there just for one night. But the fun thing was that when we arrived into the hotel, these waiters came out in sort of, white jackets, white gloves, and we're like, this is a bit bizarre, So we go in, and my father had booked us into this quite fancy hotel, unbeknown to him as well, because generally, when he was traveling through France, he would always get, places that were suggested to him by some of his clients to try and things like this. And so we went into the restaurant in the evening, and I just remember the meal still today of what I had. I mean, it was very simple, but as a very young boy, it stuck in my head forever, because it was just the complexity of some of the flavors, but also just how amazing a dish looked, that I'd never seen before. Because, sorry to my mother, but some of this food was a lot more prettier than what she had produced. But it was just the way that the chefs had put things together, and my starter was just a very simple tomato salad with, some beautiful olive oil, lots of different varieties of tomatoes, expertly sliced, put on the plate, and it just tasted amazing. And I had never, had something that was not only visually but beautiful as well. And then the main course we had was just a beautiful beef fillet that had been perfectly cooked with some hand-cut chip that had been sort of, put into a little tower. And again, it was just looking at something that was just so visually beautiful that I'd never seen before. And I didn't think that food could be like that. And it was just amazing. And then the dessert was a classic peach melba. So it was homemade vanilla ice cream, which was the first time that I had tasted fresh vanilla ice cream. As a boy of 10, tasting that and not realizing that vanilla actually was something that grew rather than coming out of a packet was also something quite amazing, because we're all used to having Wall's ice cream and that was about it. So again, it was just the visual and then complexity of taste that I had never had before. And then it was funny because I remember me and my brother just clocked each other and were like, wow, this is just amazing. And then from then, that was really when we decided, to become chefs. And so the journey then really began for the two of us. And I was very fortunate to know at a young age, as a boy, 10, 11, knowing that really what I wanted to do as a career. And it definitely helped me. And so on the return back to the UK from skiing, I then literally, I think a few weeks later, I called up our local college, pretending to be a school leaver. And I asked them, what qualifications you need to apply to be a catering student, are there any exams or interviews, whatever. And I remember the teacher's response basically saying, no, you don't need any qualifications. You just come from an entrance exam, have an interview with one of the teachers, and basically if we like you, we'll take you. And that was it. So I then knowingly went into high school, knowing that I didn't need any exam qualifications. Not saying that you guys should obviously take that into consideration. So I'd say my next 5 years of high school were complete, waste of time. And fast forward then to 16. And I remember again, another funny moment of when me and my brother were again sort of in the kitchen with my father and him hoping that we were going to get some good results for our exams. And I knew that we were completely, bad. And I remember him reading out our results in front of us, and I knew they were going to be terrible. And as he was reading these, you could see his face sort of getting redder and redder and more angry. And then, and he was just like, what the F are you going to do now, the two of you, with the results like this? There's nothing that you can do. So I thought at that point, I better be honest. And I said, well, I kind of, I said, well, we're going to become chefs. And he looked at me, he looked at the ground and looked at me and he says, what the F do you mean you're going to become chefs? I mean, where did this come from? And then I slowly sort of explained the situation from our childhood of, being with mother in the garden, growing vegetables, her taking us into the kitchen, showing us how to prepare vegetables, us going through France with him on family holidays. And you could slowly see him sort of, realize why we would become chefs. And so he accepted it. And he said, basically, well, I guess there's nothing else that you can do, is there, anyway? So off we went. We then went off to college for a couple of years. But it was funny, another funny thing happened. So in probably the space of the first 2 months that I was there, and me and my twin brother, we're like thick as thieves. I mean, we're known in our village as the terrible twins because we were little terrorists. I mean, we were just like the naughtiest of children ever. And the teacher that interviewed me at the college, he basically came up to me and he said, just be careful, I'm watching you. And I thought, well, what do you mean? And he goes, well, the only reason that you're on this course is because you're a twin. And I was like, what do you mean? He says, well, if you weren't a twin, we wouldn't have accepted you and we just had your brother. So I was like, oh, thanks for the pep talk. It's really nice. Great encouragement. And as a cocky 16-year-old that I was, I just turned around to him and I said, well, you know what? I said, in 10 years' time, you're going to know who I am and I'm going to be famous. That were my words to him. And, as a 16-year-old, you think 10 years, it's a decade, it's a long way away. But in a way, it also, sort of spurred me on to really go for it in a way, because I actually, at that point, I had made the decision that it really was going to be my life, that it really was going to be my career. So what have I got to lose just to throw myself into it, which is what I did. So, I left college after 2 years studying there, came to London. And again, this was, very early on in when I would say, there were not all that many great restaurants in London. This is sort of, 1989. So there wasn't a great choice. And so with the help of my father, we sort of decided where I was, potentially going to go and try and work. So I wrote off, as you did in those days, not anymore, but you wrote letters to people saying, I'm a very, hungry, enthusiastic, hardworking student. Do you have a job, please? And 100% of them, I wrote off about 15 letters, I remember, and all of them said no, basically. So I then turned around to my father. I said, well, this is a bit of a difficult situation because I was expecting at least one person to offer me a job, considering how enthusiastic, I wrote the letters. So I turned to my father and I said, well, what about if I say that I work for free for 6 months to prove myself? So he looked at me and said, do you think that's a good idea? I said, well, look, I think it's the only way. So I wrote off another, 10, 15 letters and saying, it's me again. Seeing as you said no, I said, I'm very happy to offer my services, for 6 months, unpaid, to prove myself, to see if you think that, I was any good. And these were all sort of, hotel restaurants, and there was a couple of, 1 Michelin star restaurants, 2 Michelin star, and maybe, a 3 Michelin star. And I literally got like 2 letters back. One was from the Roux brothers, the Gavroche, which was then a 3-star restaurant. And he again said, lovely letter, thank you so much. You're so enthusiastic. It's great to have a lovely letter like, from someone like you, so young. But no, because we have a waiting list of chefs who can't come in, blah, blah, blah. And then I had another letter came from a chef with a restaurant in Battersea in London called Cavaliers. And he said, yeah, we'll take you. So anyway, so I went to work with him for 6 months, unpaid. And it was funny because I was unpaid, I guess I wasn't sort of treated the same as everyone else. I was still working long hours and everything. I was probably doing, 60 plus hours, 65, even 70. And then once after the 6-month probation had finished, I said, okay, how am I doing? And he gave me a job. So then it was a lot more difficult, a lot more pressurized in the kitchen. And I was doing, sort of 80 plus hours. So for, sort of 19, 20-year-old, it was pretty tough. But, I got on with it because I kind of felt that I had got somewhere, that I was working in a great restaurant, and to be in a 1-star restaurant was amazing. And then after that, I'd stayed a year. And I just thought, this is a great sort of starting point, and now I wanted to go to the next level. So I then asked the chef to get me into a 2-star Michelin restaurant. And that was run by a chef called Pierre Kaufman, who had a restaurant in Chelsea called La Tonclair. And so he called him up and said, look, I've got this young boy, who's great, hardworking, blah, blah, blah. He'd like to come and work for you. So that door opened. I then went to work for him. And in that time that I was with him, in the first 6 months, the Michelin guide came out and he went from 2 to a 3-star. So I then had the experience and knowledge and understanding of working in a 3-star restaurant. And so really the sort of, I guess the next sort of 3-4 years, I say weren't easy, but I mean in terms of getting, as I said, stepping stones to another restaurant, because you basically stayed for a year basically to work in a restaurant, in a kitchen, get the understanding of all the different sections, how the kitchen run, how the chefs worked, and take that knowledge with you, and then move on to another restaurant. So I then did that, and I thought to myself, how can I make myself different from everyone else. Because at the end of the day, I think to improve yourself, you have to put yourself in an uncomfortable position. So I thought the only way of doing that would be to go and work abroad. And at that time, the only place that you would go and work was France, and that was, the mecca of gastronomy, and really the only place where, a lot of chefs were sort of revered as like gods. And at that time, there was only one, and that was a chef called Jules Robuchon. And I had worked at a restaurant when I was in London called Pied à Terre when I was 21. And he then, again, sent a letter to Jules saying, I have this amazing chef, would you be interested in having him? And basically, so I then went to Paris. I was literally 23, 24, to work at this 3-star restaurant. And at that point, he was definitely, one of the best chefs in the world, without question. Going into a restaurant like that has 3 stars, and he had, for many, many years, was just amazing, spellbinding almost, because you just don't think it's actually real or actually possible that you're there. And I had, kind of some horror moments where, because I'd worked a lot in London with French chefs, and the majority of the staff are all French, and they absolutely detested English chefs. I mean, we were just like spat on them, and they just thought we were, the worst of the worst. So I had this sort of already sort of pre-thought that all the chefs there were going to really hate me even more. But actually, it was the complete opposite. It was a really, real team camaraderie. Everyone helped each other. But it was definitely one of the hardest places that I can say that I worked in. Every chef was probably doing anywhere between 90 and 100 hours in 5 days. So not only did you have to deal with that amount of pressure, but the lack of obviously sleep definitely played on you by the end of the week. But saying that, it was it was an immense experience being in that kitchen with chefs that are highly motivated all the time and wanted to produce the very, very, very best food all the time. And you're talking about 99% consistently all the time without making any errors or mistakes. It's amazing to be in that arena. And I did at one point feel, the person that I was working with, felt the pressure of that, because Joel Robuchon had sadly one rule in his kitchen that if anyone made any mistakes ever, they were out. And the reason being is because, as he was the number one chef in the world, he had a ream of CVs and chefs that that wanted to go and work with him. And the chap that I was working with and was taking over, we had like a 2-3 week window that we were working together. He sadly for him, he made an error by forgetting something that was supposed to be cooked, and he forgot it. And then Robuchon told him to leave straight away, and then I was thrown into the deep end straight away, which is even tougher for me. I mean, I had enough experience of the understanding of French terminology and in cooking and speaking, so I got on with it. So at that time, I stayed a year, and then moved on to another 3-star in Champagne in Reims, a restaurant called Gérald Boyer. And I was there for 9 months, and then I got a call from a restaurant that I worked previously called Pied à Terre, which was the chef that got me to Jules Robuchon in the first place. And they said that the chef was leaving. Would I be interested in sort of taking the realms and taking over the kitchen? And I was at this age, only 25. I thought, wow, I'm never going to be given this opportunity ever. And I should definitely go for it. And I knew that it was going to be, a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, very hard, very demanding. I thought, well, I've probably gone through one of the hardest kitchens that it is. How much harder can it be? Anyway, so I went. We had a sort of 2-week handover. I went in at the end of January, just before the Michelin guide had just come out. And at that point, it was a 2-star restaurant. So I came in, everyone knew that I was coming to take over that restaurant. And everyone assumed that I was either going to lose, 1 star or 2 stars. I was a completely unknown. I was definitely, a gamble and a risk. But I knew that I had the seeds, to succeed. I had the temperament. I definitely, had the knowledge, the creativity. But I wouldn't say I was the best leader at times, but, I knew how to drive the team and to be focused in delivering what I hoped, would be a positive outcome. Anyway, we had, as I said, we had a changeover of, 2 weeks. The staff that were there, who promised me that they would stay until I could find replacements, but they all left within literally 2-3 weeks. There was then myself and 2 other guys. So again, we were in this wheel of working, 90 to 100 hours a week, and it was very, very tough, very demanding, and pretty stressful. But the outcome at the end was that when the guide came out in January, that I had retained the 2 stars, and unbeknown to myself that was going to happen. It wasn't even sort of in my thought process. I had assumed maybe, yes, I would have retained 1 star, but to actually have kept the 2 was just, a magical moment. And I think, it was just one of those things that that I have in my history and that I will always remember, as an amazing, reward for what I've put in. And then the other funny thing to this story is that what I told you earlier about the teacher 10 years ago. Yeah. So because I was then, the youngest ever to get 2 stars in the UK and in Europe, I had quite a bit of press. And I sent, a few of these clippings to my teacher back in Norwich. And I said, I don't know if you remember, we had this conversation in the corridor when I was 16. And I said, yeah, I'm going to be famous and you're going to know me. Anyway, he duly responded saying, congratulations and well done. So as I said, it's one of those moments, I think, that if you have, a strong belief and attitude in yourself, you can do anything. And it's something, that I stick by still today, in what I do and the kids that I, have in my kitchen. The world really is your oyster, and it's just a case of, putting the thought process to use in what you want to do. And because this industry, it is an amazing industry to be in. You can go anywhere and everywhere. You can travel all over the world. You can meet very interesting, people, and cook for amazing people. And, as we know, food is a language that everyone understands and truly loves, And then since, those crazy heydays of the 90s, I've gone on and opened, several restaurants in London. I had Tom's Kitchens for a number of years, and Tom Aikens, and then I've just recently opened Muse restaurant in Belgravia, and then opened, restaurants over other parts of the world, in Tokyo, Jakarta, the Middle East, a few more next year. So as a 53-year-old man, I can still see that the hunger is still glowing very brightly, and it's just a case of, how can we move forward? How can we improve? How can we just, do things a little bit more interesting and exciting all the time? That was a short synopsis.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Can we have a round of applause just for that? Thank you. So, actually, coming on from what you just mentioned, I recently saw that you are, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, in the Chiba prefecture in Japan, visiting a local farm for your produce, for your restaurant in Tokyo. So I just wondered if you could sort of walk us through what it's like when you go and visit these places. What are you looking for? What are you hoping to see in the farmers and the produce there? And then how do you translate that into your dishes when you serve them to customers and create them?
Very good question. I think we're fortunate, in this country, and Japan as well, and other parts of Europe. I would say that, we're very rooted in our seasons of spring, summer, autumn, winter, and they're very, very distinct with the produce that we get. So in a way, for a chef, it does make it easy on one point, is that with everything that you cook within the seasons, as long as you put them together, they will generally taste good. But it's just then the creative side that you translate that food into something not only tastes good, but visually looks amazing as well. And that is the fun part of being a chef, is that every chef is unique in their taste, in their creativity. And say, for instance, if you gave a chef three ingredients like asparagus, peas, broad beans, that are beautiful vegetables that we get in springtime, if you ask 20 chefs, they'd all create something very, very different. And that is the amazing thing, with produce, with chefs, that it's limitless to what you can do. And so when I go to a farm or I go to a producer, it's just really understanding from them, what they're trying to do with their product. And when you have an amazing product, like some of the producers that I use, even in Norfolk here, I have a farm called Old Hall Farm, and they produce some amazing dairy from some Jersey cows that we use for our butter that we make in-house, and a ricotta dish. And when you have something that is just so special and so unique, and that it's been beautifully made by very passionate and caring farmers, then you don't really need to do much to it, because the produce, again, speaks for itself. We've just got to put something tasty with it as well, And so I think the also thing that has changed dramatically over the course of me being a chef from my earlier career, of learning to now being, I guess, a head chef, is that we never do stop learning. There is always something else that you can learn, which is also truly magical, that you will never say, okay, I've learned everything that I can do, and my knowledge and understanding has stopped, but it never does. It's always going. And that's the great thing as well with the producers and farmers. They're doing exactly the same. So when you harness that together, and create something, truly special and different, it's really rewarding for both parties.
Thank you. Sort of relating to that then, obviously, the Jade Room and Garden Terrace in Tokyo, it's kind of the speciality there is fusion food. So just wondering, sort of within that learning process, how do you sort of create the perfect fusion? How do you know if it's too Western, or it's too Japanese, or too Middle Eastern? What's sort of your process behind creating these new dishes that haven't been seen before?
Well, basically, whenever I do a new restaurant in a new territory, we will get local knowledge and understanding, either through things even as simple as Google reviews or TripAdvisor, or booking systems that are restaurants like Seven Rooms, etc. And we will get just a simple understanding of different price points, different menus that the restaurants are providing. We'll look at the top sort of 10 spots of what cooking that they're doing, and really get a sort of taste and understanding of what is most popular in that city, because you need really to understand local knowledge of what is happening, which are the cool places that everyone is talking about, why are they talking about them. At the end of the day, knowledge is king in terms of creating something that you hope is slightly different, but it then is tailor-made to what everyone is liking. So there's a lot of work that goes beforehand in terms of then saying, okay, we are going to define it as X, Y, Z. And then creating, as we have in Tokyo, where in a way it's quite simple, I would say, in the fact that Japan is very similar to the UK in terms of, as we have the counties in the UK, they have the prefectures, and all the prefectures, as we have in the counties in the UK, they are renowned for either a special dish, or they're renowned for a particular product or fish or meat that is grown or produced in that area. And so, in a way, it does make it easier for us to create dishes, as I said, because they are definitely spurned on by the seasonality of the dishes. Sorry, of the food. And when I come up with the concept, particularly with the one that we have in Jade Room, I was definitely not going to do, Japanese food, because there's no way that I can be any better than a Japanese chef. So the idea was, to do a crossover of, English fine dining food inspired by Japanese seasons, and also a little bit of Japanese cooking. So in the way that, they do quite a bit of fermenting, bit of pickling, and they cook over a lot of hot coals and smoking and things like this.
Perfect, thank you. So regarding creating those dishes, I'd like to bring us, back over to the UK and talk a bit about Muse. Looking at Muse, you kind of have taken each dish and that's inspired by like a key moment, I think is the terminology used from like your childhood or kind of growing up. And you've sort of given us a bit of an insight into that. But I was just wondering if you could talk about, once again, how you translate these key moments into this uniquely British dish, obviously drawing on your like heritage from Norfolk and local produce.
Yeah, so again, I would say that the restaurant that we have in London, as you said, Muse, I wanted to, again, try, because not at the end of the day, it's not a concept that we're doing. It is a restaurant. It's going to be a fine dining restaurant, and we're very fortunate enough in London and throughout the rest of the UK to have such an amazing, consistent quality of restaurants. From 1-star to 3-star, but even casual restaurants. I guess the level of food and service, I think, has really consistently got better over the last 3-4 years since COVID as well, because the competition has got that much more fierce. And so I wanted to really have a place where we could try and make ourselves a little bit different from not just being a fine dining restaurant. And the thing for me is, whenever I go out to eat, what is it that makes me want to come back? What is it that gives me a memory that I will remember about something? And at the end of the day, that's really what it is. It is going to a restaurant, having a nice, whatever steak it is, or being spoken to, a waiter, waitress that you have a good rapport with, or it may be the atmosphere, but you remember it. And that, I think, is key for a repeat guest, is giving them a memorable occasion that they will be able to remember a day later, 2 days later, a week later, a month later. And I think for myself included, even I've gone to a 1-star or 2-star or 3-star, or even a casual restaurant, it's very rare sometimes that you will remember exactly what you had a week later, or even if a mate asks you, I heard you went to that restaurant, what did you eat? And you're like, oh God, I knew it tasted really good, but I just can't remember it. And that, for me, is really the missing link, is creating a memorable experience and almost like a journey for a guest that comes in, and there is something magical that we create that they will truly remember and take away with them when they leave. And because of that, we do have a high repeat amount of guests. So it goes really with, when guests come through, the Muse front door, how they're welcomed and how they're received, to the menu, for instance. The menu itself, I was thinking, because that is the first port of call that everyone is given. It's a menu, and menus are boring. They haven't changed in centuries. It's a piece of paper with a description of the dishes that you're going to have. You open it and you look at it and you go, this one sounds nice. Do I feel like a bit of fish or a bit of meat or vegetable? And that's it. And you make your choice. So what I wanted to do was completely turn that on its head. And so when you come to Muse, we basically have this beautiful wooden menu. So it's a wooden menu with this sort of lasered live, it's called a live spine. So when you open it, it's basically one piece of wood that opens. And inside we've got a pop-up of the building of Muse, because it's on a corner, so it works perfectly for a pop-up. And I got the idea from one of my children's pop-up books, and I just thought, that's a fun thing. You're not going to expect it, that something pops out at you when you open a menu. So I thought, that'd be great. So I stole that idea. I found someone on the internet who could do pop-ups, and so they created a pop-up of our building. and it's quite cute and it's fun. Tells a story. It's a bit more interesting. And then on the menu that we do, because we only do one menu, it's a tasting menu. So literally every course that they have is a story, and we only give 3 main components of that dish. So they haven't got a clue, basically, what they're going to eat at all. Of course, there'll be like, if it's a shellfish, it'll be scallop, say, with kombu and turnip and things like this. So they'll know maybe they got what the main protein is, but they won't have a clue about what it's going to taste like, what it could visually look. So again, there's this sort of intrigue and excitement on their behalf because they don't know what they're going to eat. So then when it comes to the table, they go, oh, wow, I wasn't expecting that. So it's a bit more interesting. And then the chefs that deliver the food, they then deliver the story about the particular dish. And well, there's a couple of dishes that we have on the menu that are, I guess, our signature dishes. And one of them is the ricotta dish, which is based on one of the suppliers that they are literally not even 10-15 minutes from where I used to live. So in Norfolk, we have a saying, if something is close, it's just down the road, as they would say. So this dish is called Just Down the Road. So people are like, what the hell is that? Just down the road. And then we just have, milk from the cows, ricotta, and then we'll put a seasonal garnish with it, so a particular vegetable. And then I then go in the story about how this dairy farm was literally, from when I was growing up as a child, was 12 minutes from where I used to live. And then it's a nice story, and people are really taken back by that, but how much more personal it is. And I think that's really what people want, is something, it's not in your face, but it's just a nice touch. It's got a little bit of romance to it. It's personal and it's touching. And I think in today's world, people need more of that. It's not just robotic behavior. People come into Muse, and as I said, it's an experiential journey that they're taken on.
Perfect, thank you. Drawing a bit about what you said there, actually, the idea coming from your children's pop-up book, I'm thinking about kind of the influence that you had as a child, like kind of growing things with your mother in the garden and your dad taking you to nice restaurants and stuff like that. Do you think your children will kind of follow on a similar route? Do you think they're interested in cooking and kind of the culinary art as you were, or? I mean, that's kind of an interesting question.
Listen, I would, because I have 2 girls. I would really love for one of them, to go into cooking, because there's definitely not enough female chefs in the hospitality industry. But no, I mean, they are now at an age of, they're 9, well, nearly 10 and nearly 12. So they're very inquisitive, that's for sure. They're very righteous, our girls, that is for sure as well. But no, it's been an interesting journey, I think, for them, because they were, both of them, very, very fussy as kids, as I was as well. I actually didn't enjoy eating fish until I was like 23. Can you believe it? Yeah, as a chef, quite bad. But no, they are. I'm trying to get them to try an interesting, flavors and things. And sometimes they're just let me. I'm not trying that. You got to be joking. But the elder one, she eats sushi and she eats raw fish and things now, which is great, because I would never going to do that at her age. No way. So I'm hopeful, but I'm not going to force them. I'm not going to push them. But I think it is exciting for me as a chef, to see them, trying flavors that I would have never tried, because I would say that I was pretty fussy as a child. But I think it's just, as a parent anyway, it's just very exciting seeing, your kids grow up and try, new things. And because I travel, quite a bit anyway, and when whenever I go traveling and I see something or try something that I've never tried before myself, I obviously will definitely try it. I'm always thinking, well, maybe I can give that to my girls, see what their reaction will be.
Perfect, thank you. So following on, actually from kind of liking fish when you were 23, you wrote a book in 2008 called Fish. I think sort of it's really exciting, the fact that was sort of ahead of its time, talking about kind of like the fishing industry and stuff like that. So I think kind of given, recent developments with kind of Brexit, kind of, focusing on kind of climate control issues with the oceans as well, how do you see sort of the fishing industry changing over the next, say, 5-10 years? And how do you think that's actually going to, reflect on sort of the restauranting industry?
I don't. I mean, yes, the fishing industry has always had troubles and issues ever since I've remembered in my career. But we are fortunate enough that we do have an amazing amount of passionate producers, not only fishermen and what the fishermen do. And I've worked. Only did a day, but it was definitely hard enough. But I worked on a small day boat and went out to sea, and it is it's brutal. I have to say it's brutal. I went out in the North Sea with a couple of cod fishermen, and they did everything on a long line. So they're only catching certain, because of the hooks, they're only catching a certain size of fish. And what a lot of people don't realize is that most fish in UK waters, they don't actually reach sexual maturity until 5 to 7 years old. And the problem is that most of the fish that are caught are below that even. So there's why there has been a bigger issue with fish stocks. But recently, there has, I don't know if you've seen the news, but there's been tuna, bluefin, that have been caught off the coasts of Devon, which haven't been seen in 130 years, literally. So there is signs of improvement. I know also that the cod stocks are coming back in the North Sea. So there is a lot of care being done on a lot of levels. But I think at a consumer side, that is really where I think education needs to come, because when you go to a fish counter in a supermarket, it's pretty sad of what we see. We get salmon, smoked haddock, some dodgy looking shellfish frozen mix, maybe some squid and maybe some oysters, and that's it really. So in terms of what we're all being told to eat, it's basically cod, haddock and salmon, and that's it. And there are another 10 or 12 other different species that we could eat for sure, that doesn't then put pressure on the other stocks of things like cod or haddock or plaice, sole, things like this. And I think that really is what is missing is more education on other species of fish that that we could eat.
Perfect. Following on from sort of like consumer, I think what I've noticed, anyways, correct me if I'm wrong, is a recent trend sort of within the fine dining industry of kind of no waste cooking recently. So I'm thinking kind of maybe like Fallows in London, or I can't remember what the one, Noma in Copenhagen, for example, where kind of you consume an entire animal. So the notion is that nothing goes to waste, kind of thinking ecologically. What do you sort of think, trends like this will also, will they follow on kind of throughout the rest of the fine dining industry? Or is that something you think will kind of peter off in the next few years?
I think, looking at the cost of food, I think is a realization of, because of the cost of the product, the transport, the cost of producing it, getting it from A to B, or if it comes from Europe, and Brexit has played a big part in this, of huge increases in costs and delivery and everything. So I think everyone is much more aware of wastage and utilizing everything from vegetable peelings to scraps to every part of a fish carcass to any sort of, I guess, more extreme parts of offal or anything that comes from chicken, beef, lamb, pork, whatever. Because at the end of the day, we have seen since COVID, since Brexit, a huge increase in prices. And for people that may have a little bit of understanding and knowledge on how to cook something at home rather than taking, a free and easy, microwave meal or something, and cooking something that they love to cook. And now they've realized, I can't afford that anymore because it's too expensive. So I think people are being a little bit more smart. Chefs definitely, in terms of creating things from waste, whether that's a simple vegetable stock, or it could be a soup, could be something that can be fermented or pickled, or made into a sauce or something that we may not have utilized before. So there is definitely now a bigger effort in utilization of waste amongst restaurants, for sure. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. I think now would be a perfect time to sort of turn to the audience for questions. So I think there should be an EM, but if not, I can pop down with a mic. Does anybody have a question at all? We'll go, just here at the front.
Are there any other chefs that have either made a dish or maybe done, I don't know, for lack of a better word, some gimmicky thing in their restaurant that you wish you had gotten there first?
There are definitely lots of trends, and I get asked every year around January, what's the next trend going to be? And I mean, the one that I do remember is a cronut. I don't know if any of you have had one, but it's a Danish pastry that is laminated and deep fried and filled with a filling of your choice. But there are thousands of things that have been made that we all think, God, if I only had thought that, I could be a multimillionaire. I mean, look at Heinz and what they've created with baked beans, But I think for convenience foods and things like HelloFresh, who have created, I think since lockdown, where they're creating sort of partly ready-made foods. People like that who have really made something out, I think, of a difficult time for everyone, and a lot of chefs got onto the bandwagon of creating ready meals, and that was something that restaurants did when we had the lockdowns, and it was a great way for them to invent something new, something different. And there was definitely I saw a lot of chefs doing some weird and wonderful, wacky things that they had invented just specially to give something exciting for people to taste and something different. And food creativity, as you said, is really a magical thing. It's I think when you see something that is sometimes very simple that has just been created, you do kick yourself sometimes, like, God, if I only thought of that. Yeah.
Perfect. Anybody else?
So we were here a couple of years ago with the Mark White, who was sitting, I think, in the same chair that she was sitting in. And his talk was really different from yours. I think his talk involved a lot more of the rock and roll aspect of the chef of the 90s and the 2000s. And I was wondering, since in your talk there wasn't that much of that rock and roll chef lifestyle aesthetic coming across, I was wondering whether there was a dimension of rock and roll that we seem to have talked about tonight, or whether your career was actually very different from, say, Michael White.
No, it was definitely rock and roll in the 90s. Yes, I can assure you. It was there's when I speak about the past, I do sound like an old grandfather. When it was my time, we didn't do this and we did this and we did that, and time has definitely moved on into a better place in terms of the workplace, what we're giving to our staff, the way that they're treated, hospitality as an industry, and the way that it's going in the direction. I wouldn't want anyone to come into an industry as it was back then, because it was hellish, it was awful. I think for chefs that were in that era and working through that, they'll probably tell you exactly the same. Yes, Marco is one of those figures, and he was definitely a big part of that, and he was pinnacle to driving British cuisine and cooking forward into a way that we had never seen before. And now as a chef, when you look back at his food, it's so dated. But the fact that he as a person, and he's a big character, as we know, he did incredible things for the industry. And I think, for people that talk about the past, it's nice to hear that, but it should stay in the past, because I think at the point of telling young chefs of how it was, I think they would run a mile, and I think, getting young people into this industry now is so important for us, to take this further with the industry, because we're all struggling, I think, in every sector in terms of getting new staff in. It's difficult. So the only way to do that is is with passion and with respect and positivity, of getting people into the industry. But yes, to answer your question, I did have a lot of rock and roll moments, yes.
When you were talking about your sort of beginning of your career, you wrote, say, 15 letters, and you picked up the name of the letters.
No.
In the same way that they would now. Do you think it's harder to become a chef today, like in the same way you start young, or can you start later on in life? You have all these chefs on TikTok now, and they've become very successful just doing their own thing.
They do. Listen, I think the challenge for for chefs in my era, were very different. It was, to stand out from the crowd then, it was a lot tougher. As I said to you, it was very difficult to get, for one, to get a job in a very good restaurant. It was exceptionally hard. And when you were there, you just had to put up with it and deliver. There was another 20, 30, 40 chefs ready and willing to take your place. So, so you had to make the most of it and make the best of it. And what I did to stand out from everyone else was to go and work abroad. But nowadays, as you pointed out, particularly through, the lockdowns and COVID, quite rightly, you had all these chefs that started doing things on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Suddenly they go from, 30 followers to, 300,000 followers very, very quickly. But listen, I think that is a positive thing because it gets more people interested in food and what chefs are doing. And as I have seen, with the use of social media in the way that it really opens the doors to our industry has been amazing. And being able to, as a chef, to see what other chefs are doing in their kitchen visually and even in real time and watching videos is just amazing because it really helps to publicize our industry in a positive manner. And I think that's a great thing.
So, I'm just curious, how true is it that when anonymous Michelin critiques come in, one guy gets a tasting menu and the other guy gets an a la carte dish? Or how can you tell they're coming in?
Well, you can't. Since I've opened Muse, we opened in December 19, and we're only 23 seats. We've not spotted them once yet, and they have been in. So it's still a conundrum I'm trying to work out. But if you know, I'd like to hear. But I think, when there was all this, old stigma of, it's going to be, two single guys coming in, ordering a la carte menu. They're asking lots of questions. They're always the first in, they're the last out. That definitely doesn't happen anymore. You may get a single diner on his own and, they're definitely not going to be dressed in a suit. So it is a little bit more difficult to spot them. But I think, for a Michelin, inspection, it's definitely, when I have had them, it's very nerve-wracking. I definitely still get nervous when they come in, which is a good thing. But no, it is, it's still very hard to detect them.
How have you found the culture actually inside the kitchens changed since you started? You were saying when you were in Paris, and if someone made a single mistake, they were straight out the door. Would you find a restaurant in the UK that still has that kind of policy?
There is, good question. Yes, the industry again, as I said, has definitely changed in the right way. In my time, restaurants were very fortunate to have a huge backlog of chefs that were willing and able and happy to do 70, 80, 90 hours. That definitely doesn't happen anymore. And the industry has definitely also, for the better and positivity of the industry, changed after lockdown and COVID, when we had time just to really sort of reevaluate how we were working, and in terms of the structure of restaurants and the businesses behind it, because the hours were still, I wouldn't say excruciatingly long, but it just didn't give enough proper time for people to have downtime. And I think for a lot of people, in lockdown, having, proper time with, families and friends, made a massive impact on them. And a lot of them realized, I am missing a huge part of my life working in these restaurants and kitchens without seeing my friends all the time. And so we had to really reevaluate what we were doing. And now, we completely changed the structure of how we work. And I would say 90%, of restaurants all across the UK have done that as well. But it's a lot tougher, it really is a tough industry to make it actually financially work and be viable. Costs have gone through the roof in terms of staffing costs, rent, rates, running costs, power. So at the end of the day, it is a lot harder, but without, as we know, in any business, without a good team, you can't consistently carry on. And so, we always encourage growth from within. That's a power part of what we do in identifying, key people that we feel that they're an important part of the team, and we can, promote them up the ladder. And that helps us keep our staff much longer.
Any more? Just there? Yeah.
Yes. Say again? I do, yes. Not very often, but I had, I don't know if you've seen it, but I did a television show quite a while ago. It was in the middle of lockdowns called Snack Masters. And it was I wish they had done it, but it was a great TV show because they basically made Michelin star chefs recreate fast food. So there's anything from, Domino's pizza to a McDonald's burger, to Quavers, to Twix, Kit Kat, everything. I had the fortunate task of replicating a KFC Zinger burger. And I tell you, because chefs are very inquisitive and we want to understand everything that goes into it, and we will go to the end of the world to replicate or to understand how they did that. Because once you start breaking down, say for instance, Cadbury's Curly Whirly, when you look at that, how it's made, you've got a soft caramel, chocolate on the outside, the caramel is set perfectly, the chocolate doesn't melt, it's pretty amazing. And when you start looking into these fast foods, about how they make it consistently and at that price level, it's very fascinating. So with the KFC Zinger burger, I ate a lot of Zinger burgers, I have to say. And I have to say I quite enjoyed it. For £6, I thought it was a pretty good meal. But it's funny because there was three of us recreating this. One of us was in charge of the bun, one of us was in charge of the chicken fillet, and one of us was in charge of the fillings. So we had basically around 2.5 weeks to get into this and to understand how it's created. And this was just by consistently eating through several of them every day. And I can tell you by the end of 2.5 weeks, I didn't want to see another Zinger burger. But halfway through as well, because they could see that we were doing fairly well, they then said, we now want you to recreate the original Kentucky Fried Chicken recipe. So when that was thrown onto us, I thought, okay, this is a really good challenge because everyone has tried to crack that code of the Kentucky Fried Chicken. I won the round with another chef of creating the Zinger burger, so I had the trophy of that. But I also, when we recreated the original Kentucky Fried Chicken, they actually said that it was the best and closest they had ever tasted.
Could you tell us the spices?
Sorry, I can't. No.
Okay, maybe we've got time for one more. Yeah, just that. Perfect. Yeah. Perfect.
That's a very good question. I have created, hundreds and, I wouldn't say thousands, probably 1,000 odd dishes, must be by now, since I started, cooking professionally for myself in my restaurants from the age of 25, 26. And there have been many, and I have archives of pictures of dishes that I have created from, 15, 20 years ago. When I look back at them, I kind of, my heart goes pitter patter because when you look back, as a person, you mature and your ideals and your philosophies change and your tastes. And then sometimes I look back at a picture like, oh my God, you did that? Oh God, horrific. And then I look at some and I go, wow, that's amazing. And creativity is really, I think, just so special in what we do. And I think one of the dishes that I've had on, which we now do at Muse, is a langoustine dish. And this dish has been around for about 15 years. And I always tweak it and I always change it, whether that's with the flavors or the way that it looks. But the main elements are is a langoustine or lobster with apple and with pork. But outside of work, I would say that in terms of what I love doing and love cooking is just very simple home style cooking. My roast chicken is one of the best.
Well, thank you very much for today. Can we have a round of applause?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for coming, guys.